Welcome to episode 9, the final episode, in fact, of season 1 of the People and Performance podcast. I am your only host today, Bill Banham, because my wonderful co-host, Christopher Bjorling, is actually the guest today. I am going to pose some questions to Chris as we look back on the episodes that we have recorded in season 1. So this is very much a reflections episode, if you like, where I'll be picking Chris's brains about some of the lessons that he learned from talking with some pretty awesome guests over the course of season 1. And good news for you listeners, I know you can't get enough of this fabulous new podcast. So the good news is we're going to be back again from September 2021 with season 2, and there's going to be lots and lots of more content to come. Hey Chris, welcome back to the podcast.
Bill, thank you very much. It is so different sitting on this side of the table right now. I'm nervous.
You should be, because I can't go too easy on you.
I believe that.
So what we're going to do today, we're going to approach this in kind of a structured, formatted way, and we're going to tease from you what are your 2 or 3 biggest takeaways from each of the episodes and why that is. And as part of that as well, I'm going to invite you to perhaps share what are you and what are the team over at Fidello doing to help HR pros, talent pros and leaders in that particular area. Okay, so let's start with episode 2, because episode 1, listeners, was the intro episode. So that was just Chris and I setting things up. So let's start with episode 2, and that one was with Keris Hogardi, who's based in beautiful British Columbia and Vancouver, and she's the vice president of People Services North America at Colliers International. And each of the episodes, by the way, is hoping to try and take an employee life cycle chronological approach to workforce planning. So in the case of Keris, we're looking at topics such as what the labor market looks like right now, what are the challenges for hiring, how to step up in terms of projecting an awesome employer brand in a time when it is so difficult to attract top talent. So Chris, looking at episode 2 with Keris, maybe you can share what your 2 or 3 biggest takeaways from that episode were, and what are you and the Fidello team doing to help HR pros, talent pros and leaders in that area?
Well, if I could step back for 1 second and just give a big shout out to everybody who participated during this season. There was a lot of great learning that could occur if you sat and listened to all the modules and to listen to the different nuances from person to person, if some of them touch the same topics. But when you look at it, it's kind of almost a shame that we're only picking a couple. But I understand for the sake of our timing, it's there. I encourage anybody to go back, and if you haven't listened yet, listen to some of these other ones, specifically when we hit some of the high points for them. But with Keris was fun, energetic, and we did her early in the series, and we were just starting the rollout from the pandemic being closed down, and we were talking about what is that the future of the employee look like, and is it a good place for them to market, or is it a good place for the employer? And she just flat out pulled the rug out and said, you know what, it's right now. It is now. It is such a market for the prospective employee, the candidate, that it's important for them to understand and ask questions to get the right fit for the organization that they may want to choose to go to. Now, this sounds kind of weird when we're talking about an organizational perspective, but I wanted to highlight that because, one of the key takeaways that I got from Keris was that she said, you know what, employers need to start being really proactive. No longer can you just post a job on board and expect, 5, 10, 15, 20 candidates that may be great matches for it. You need to start actively and being aggressive and starting your searches and your scans to try to pick up people that are going to fit your organization, that are great for the success that you're going to have based upon your brand, based upon the culture, based upon the performance factors you're going to need for those people. So, that piece was great when she talked about just being proactive. And then in addition to that, she said, look internally. You know why? Because a lot of the internal people are leaving. They're getting headhunted. They're seeing other opportunities for different pay scales, for different opportunities on their own to perhaps broaden their career spectrum. So that concept of looking internally is really a key thing when I look at this, in addition to being proactive. in the fact that we've got talent, and are we treating them well? And if not, what can we do to treat them better? And how can we maintain and hold on to those great pieces of people talent that are going to make us successful over time? And one of the aspects that she highlighted really well for it was, the employee brand. The employee brand needs to be focused and clear and authentic. And so when you're looking at the brand of an organization, in my summarization of her terms, you're really looking at what are you doing to attract people? Why do people want to be with you? Why do they want to work with you? Why do they want to be part of your organization? Why do they want to be part of your team and experience those things? So it's the concept of getting your culture expressed and your values. There was a lot of statements on the values that you have. And when we look at the values and the culture, it really kind of defines the work environment that you want these workers to come to or to stay in. And so working those brand pieces are really important for you out there. And so those are some of the big takeaways that I had from there. A lot more other pieces, but those are some of the big ones there. But for us at Fidello, we kind of help you or help organizations, find that great candidate. So as you're starting to put together your pieces and you're starting to look for, how can we market ourselves and how can we market jobs, or how can we maintain and look internally and get people to ascend the career ladder for themselves, or to be a successionary action by looking down the ladder and pulling people up. So we help organizations identify and capture, their essence of their culture, the values, and the requisite skills that will really flesh out an employee brand. A lot of times companies, big and small, don't really focus on, we know we have a culture, but they don't know how to market that or how to internalize that so that they can carry it forward to other things. And so we do a lot of work with organizations that are helping to really pull out and express what their culture is in a way that makes it focused for the current employee plus the future employee. And then also the values, why do I want to be here? Do we value integrity? Are we a trusting organization? And then the list goes on along those lines. So you kind of move it there. And what we found over the years of doing this is there was a baseball movie. Bill's a baseball fan, so I'm going to pull up a baseball movie. It was called For the Love of the Game. Had Kevin Costner in it years ago, but he used the phrase "clear the mechanism." And in that game, or the movie that he was there by saying "clear the mechanism," he just reduced the noise around things and was able to focus specifically on creating a good pitch. And so this is a story of a guy who late in his career pitches a no-hitter. So by clearing the mechanism, he removes the distractions that sometimes cloud your vision, cloud your understanding of things. And that's what we kind of do. We fundamentally can come in and not be distracted by the noise of the day-to-day, by the focus of things that are of the critical nature for the next 24 or 72 hours, and really understand and define those pieces that are important for that great candidate. So that's kind of what we do, Bill, for in that line. But Karis was wonderful. Love to have her in a future season again to talk about more things as we go on.
Keris is wonderful, Chris. I am a baseball fan. I did not know about For the Love of the Game. I think Kevin Costner is Field of Dreams as well, right? So
Yeah,
he's all over the baseball movies. There we go.
You should watch that one. It's a great one. It's a fun one to watch.
Noted. I'm going to check it out, see if it's on Netflix later on. Okay, let's move on to episode 3 then. Which is with Serge Boudreau, who is the founder and co-host of the popular recruitment and HR podcast, The Recruitment Flex. Yours truly has been a guest on it, so do check it out just for laughs, if nothing else. And Serge is an awesome guy. He's very charismatic. He's been on the TA side, on the talent attraction side, and on the talent management side for a number of years, and that's given him a platform now to start his own podcast and whatnot as well. And in that conversation, we focused on how we can use job profiles in ways that recognize the changes brought on by a post-pandemic approach to employment, and it is very different to what was out there before. So, same sort of question for you again, Chris. In terms of what are your 2 or 3 biggest takeaways from episode 3 with Serge? I'd love to hear from you now. What really what really struck home for you, and in addition, again, what are you guys at Fidello doing to help HR talent and leaders in that area of job profiles and job descriptions.
Certainly. We gave Serge this topic of job profiles, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Um, it's kind of like I'll do some presentations where I throw up a picture of a dog, or ask people to think of a dog. And if you think of a dog, you can think of a big dog, a little dog, a barking dog, a quiet dog, a goofy looking dog. There's a variety of things just with a 3-letter word. So the concept of a job profile, when we introduced it to Serge, it could go different ways, and he kind of put it into some great pieces, and I like the way he broke it down. First, he calls it's a journey. So you start with a profile, you move the profile to a description, and then you create an advertisement for it. Because his piece was around marketing for positions and for recruitment activities along those lines. So as you looked at it, you think, oh, wow, that's really a great way to focus on it. Now, he focused on the concept that the profile is really the skills and knowledge and behaviors or the attributes associated with it, with the position. And that's, in his world, it's done by the hiring manager because, he thinks they know the competencies. And so it's like, okay, starting at the core fundamental area, let me know what that person needs to look like and be, as we're looking at that stuff. So that's the focus of the profile for him. And then you move it into a job description, which is more around the polishment of it, the taking it by an HR professional and pulling it together and packaging it with all the legalese and all that other kind of fun stuff fun. Yeah, that's a great term. Anyway, a lot of the fun stuff associated with the job description, just to formalize it and put it out there and have it in your tool set as you go forward to seek a candidate. And then the nice thing that he did, and he talked about, that I thought was just really fun, was a job ad. He later talked about, doing some visual job ads and the Busy Recruiter, and, the opportunity to put a job description or a job posting that you have that online into more of an advertisement, a visual thing. As he referred to it, he called it the the cereal box. You're looking at the front page of the cereal box. So for me, that could be Rice Krispie treats or Tony the Tiger. Well, I guess he's in your gas tank. Who is the cornflakes? I don't know. Anyway, frosted cornflakes. Anyway, but you have that just appeal, that curbside appeal, and it drives the focus of people coming into it and seeing it. And then you kind of put the side information on, which is the profile and the fleshed out job description that's there. And so having that information available in this job ad, and then adding to it the reason why people should work for you, and show the proof. If you are a highly diverse organization, show numbers. If you believe in, and I think this is kind of a direct paraphrase, if you believe in, having on-site healthcare or childcare, show the center, talk about it, do those types of things. Make yourself differentiate with your posting through this ad process. So it's really a great concept. If you haven't listened to it, I think you should go back and listen to it some more. But we always ask a question at the end. And there's a section in there that I really liked, that when we asked him, what's a high performing company to you? And he came back, and some of his points were focusing on the outcomes, and then providing resources to make people successful, and then holding people accountable for their outputs and the culture of the organization. So those three kind of things are really, core to not only taking the job description, getting a person into the organization, and then, onboarding them and bringing them along the line, but really kind of, when you look back at the job description itself, focus on the outcome. What should this person be doing? So it's not a surprise for a person when they walk through the door, and then being held accountable for it. And a lot of people like accountability more than most people understand. So I think those are wonderful points from him. But we at Fidello, we kind of use the job profiling journey, that, as Serge calls it, and you kind of come in. We'll do a lot of work with competency-based profiles for an organization, defining those skills, knowledges, and behavioral terms and putting it out there. We think, while it can be done by a hiring manager, sometimes it's really tough to do if you just say, hey, profile that person over there. They don't really necessarily have the right tool set for it. So we look to help create tool sets that allow the frontline managers and HR professionals to really profile those information pieces, to understand what the behavioral competencies are, and pulling it together, and then also we can help putting the pieces together and fleshing it out further into that job description. We've done all this type of work for large companies, small companies, and in part, kind of like what I talked about with Karis, sometimes you don't see it because you're too much into the day to day. So having that step back or us stepping in and looking at it gives us the advantage to really drive home some great resources for you to work with as you proceed. And then, I want to focus on the outcomes and the accountability. A lot of times when we come in and help an organization with tools or processes, you're looking at an outcome-based approach to creating a process. What are we doing? Why are we doing this and wanting to do it efficiently? And what's our outcome when we get to that point? So a lot of that process development to get to productive outcome and hold people accountable along the way. But most importantly, a lot of what we do inside of those processes and accountabilities, we look to enable them for their success. It could be career mapping, it could be development planning, and it could be a lot of different things. And also, as the organization grows, those needs change and those opportunities change. And so we often, set up evergreen approaches to redefine and to move people along, not from just a job profiling, job description, job ad, but also to, what do you do when the person's in the company? And it's kind of fun. So that's where we are.
Chris, you and I are really lucky to have some awesome guests on season 1. And one of my favorites was Matthew Hamilton, who is the head of HR strategy and people analytics at Protective Life. And the reason why he's one of my favorites is he's a big believer that the best performing companies put people data at the heart of their HR decisions, and he's had a lot of success. So he joined Protective Life to help them build data-driven capabilities in their own HR department and to take their performance to new levels. And this is on the back of being a helicopter pilot, I think he was, in the military. He's just a really impressive guy. So looking back at episode 4, Chris, what are your 2 or 3 biggest takeaways from that episode with Matthew, and why? And of course, in addition, what are you and Fidello doing to help HR pros, talent pros, and leaders in the data area?
Excellent. Well, first you stole my thunder. I was going to bring up the helicopter piece. I always think it's cool. It's just fun for me to think of somebody who can fly a helicopter. I just think it's probably one of the most difficult things. And that's probably because I'm just extremely naive, but it looks so fun where you can just go up, go down, go left, go right, do kind of whatever you want to, just moving your hands and your arms. And so that's kind of cool. So anyway, back into the article or the podcast that we had that was really good for us. That we asked him, in today's environment, because he kind of had an interesting path to getting into HR. He started doing some things, and they said, "Oh, you can work with numbers because of your backgrounds," and leadership, and so he kind of got shifted over in HR. And then it's like, okay, well, how can you help us understand different things, different components that are out there and doing things? So the concept of providing analysis or analytical skills or data analytics, as we call it today, really was kind of a he was a pioneer in his space for it. He wasn't necessarily hired for it. It wasn't his primary training, but he comes out and we asked him the question, what do you think about HR professionals now? Because he had referenced 2 different camps, pure HR professionals and pure data analytic people. And he said, really, your HR professionals now need some good core analytical skills. And I think we're all seeing that and hearing that. And I would concur, just from the experience we've had as, Fidello working with organizations, your senior leadership teams, they really want that. They want to understand strategy for HR, and they also want to see results, and they want to see that return on investment or the ability to do predictive analysis for, hiring needs and workforce planning needs. So, but, as he talked about it, he said, really you need to come with data facts to the conversation when you come in as an HR professional. And I think that is so true when you look at it and move it forward. And, Bill asked him in our interview, said, what metrics should you look at? And he's like, well, they are always changing and evolving. And we see that as well, too, because he said right now, when we interviewed him, it's retention, the resignation rate by end performers, the time off use. How long has it been since people took time off? And then, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion numbers. And are we having career paths? Are we, creating the right opportunities for everybody and enabling them along the way? So, those are some hot metrics right now, especially as we're coming back out of the pandemic, or at least we hope we are. We have this new strain coming through, but at least we hope we're moving forward from that. So, but he does reference that they change and evolve, and I think that's important. At Fidello, what we've seen over the years is that we're trying to, or we're seeing the HR professional try to make that move from just being HR, understanding people, soft skills, so forth, more into the data analytics and the ability to use those um, numbers and activities and stuff, similar to what Matthew was talking about, for looking at different aspects of life, but also for how do we move forward? What kind of talent base do we have? What are our opportunities to have people ready for a major expansion and growth opportunities? So at Fidello, when we set up tools and processes, we ask a lot about, what data is going to be required out of this to move forward. And a lot of times, unfortunately, some of our clients say, well, they don't know, they can't articulate it. So we work with them and we talk with them about, what it is, where is it going? Is it something we can capture? If it's not something that they currently have, can we add it to what we're doing? you know, and then can we then take and report off on it and do those types of things? And one of the benefits we've have is we have a very agile team. So if we create tools, we can also modify those tools rather quickly. So we can add new data structure components, we can add new report needs, and really give the ability to have almost a real time changing data analytical tool set for you to move forward with. And when we do that for our clients, it's really giving our HR people a great seat at the table because they're able to articulate well current state and potential future state by making some modifications and alterations perhaps to processes and plans. So it's really a great deal for everybody. If you haven't been involved with analytics yet, I encourage you to listen to this podcast, and then also just invest some time in it.
Okay, so let's continue on through our wonderful magical mystery tour journey here today, Chris, and let's talk about episode 5, and that was with an absolute gent. And I consider him to be a friend, although I've not known him all that long, but he's just such a nice guy. In fact, you and I were invited onto his podcast recently as well, and we just got to chat about sports and leadership. And that's Russell Robinson, who is founder at Amplified Research and Consulting. He's also senior training and engagement advisor with the US federal government. And in that conversation that we had with Russell, he spoke about how to help employees find their voice, and also the consequences when that doesn't happen, to company culture, to productivity, to attrition rates, to presenteeism and absenteeism, and so on and so forth. So looking back on episode 5, Chris, maybe you can share your 2 or 3 big takeaways from that chat with Russell, and what you and Fidello are doing at the moment to help HR pros, talent pros, and leaders when it comes to helping their employees find their voice.
Well, first of all, thank you for using a Beatles reference, knowing that you're British. I'll give you another one. Let's just, the magical mystery tour was yours, and let's just get on this magic bus and talk about Russell. Quote the Who. We'll keep it all British right now. Russell was great. I enjoyed listening to him. I enjoyed our podcast with him. When you had to bug off, he and I talked for about an hour afterward. Great personality, great individual, great thoughts. And, when we look at this, his experience lies in the federal government for the U.S. federal government, with one of the agencies, and he gets to do a lot of different things there. But he also has an independent consulting group that he's working in and moving along as well. And plus he does his own podcasts, and just a great guy, a lot of great thoughts. If you get a chance to listen to him, we encourage that. But the big piece that he had here is really talking about employee voice. So a lot of times we, in organizations, we'll do surveying. Sometimes we survey people to death, or at least it seems that way. We'll do, pulse surveys, climate surveys, voice of the customer, and the list goes on along those lines. And NPS surveys, and it goes there. But, one of the things that he stated he really loves, he likes the pulse surveys. And the focus there, and it really resonated with me because we've seen it as well, is that in today's environment, especially now as we're coming through this pandemic and people are returning to work or they're working in a hybrid situation, part-time in the office and part-time at home, things are changing quickly. And so the concept of using a short pulse-based survey is really something that he loves to use in order to get that voice of the employee. And the voice of the employee is, what are they feeling now? How are they feeling? And what are they doing? So, the opportunity for getting that quick understanding of where we are today can help move the organization through leadership modifications and plans, processes, actions, the whole concept of change management. We'll talk about that a little bit later, of monitoring the process, but also being able to provide quick course correction as you move through that. So that voice is it's really good in there. And, back to that point where I referenced a moment ago, which was, sometimes we over survey. He says in his mind, he goes, we're not really over surveyed, we're under action. And I thought that was just a great statement because he probably articulated better than I've done with my clients over the years, because, you don't just ask the employees for their opinion and then do nothing. Sooner or later that's going to shut down, and we're going to talk about that next point from him. But you ask the employees for things, and then action occurs, and you start building a trust of, hey, if I'm going to ask you and listen and then take action, I really value your opinion. So that concept of the employee voice is critical to really being able to gauge the temperature and move in the right direction, whether that's there. One of the other pieces that he talked about is the under action component piece, where all of a sudden the employees go silent. They stop providing survey responses. They don't do different things. They're not putting stuff out there. And you're like, oh, okay, that's there. And, he gave a great story about an airline and some different things based upon a cultural implication of, we don't give upward feedback. So you don't question the captain as the plane, comes to its demise. But he kind of laid out for us why, people remain silent. So here are those 4 points that he kind of listed for us. He goes, first of all, leaders don't care. They don't want to hear our voice. That's kind of the feedback you're getting. It's back into that situation where they're asking, but nothing ever happens. This one kind of flows with it. It's futile. They've done nothing in the past to really help us along the way. And then depending upon the way the survey goes, whether it's a climate or a pulse, there can be retribution from direct line managers when they start looking at, if you do rating your manager. So all of a sudden it becomes awkward to put stuff down, because it could mean, your life in that organization comes to an end, and because you're kind of muscled out. And I've actually seen that occur in some of these situations where we do more of a climate survey and there's a low trust factor and different things, and you can see retribution. So you try to, as a surveyor, you try to move away from that, but it's real for the aspect of silence. And then also the adverse impact on the person's career. Even though you may not be forced out or full retribution, if you're kind of, sometimes you have a very strongly driven personality based organization, and if that person becomes offended and you're on that side that's kind of making the offensive statements, whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent, you kind of, has an adverse impact on the career. So what do? I kind of wove a little bit of that into here. We see similar when we run our survey tools, either pulse or climate, a lot of under actions that are there. So what we'd like to do whenever we're setting up questions or items with people when they're doing it, is like, okay, what actions are you willing to take from this? If you have a poor situation in your, managers and their number of direct staff, and the fact that it's going to impact some survey question, what are you going to do? Are you willing to reanalyze and add new managers to the mix to decrease the number of direct employees per manager, or what? So we kind of start with that process and talk them down the line and say, look, when you do this, all right, you need to build trust. This is an action. It's not just for you to see it once or once a year or once every 2 years and put it in a drawer and think, well, we did something that changed it. You need to be able to specifically focus. And this is what I help our customers do on their actions in association to the items that they're asking, questions that they're asking, and having them take action once they do. And then the other aspect of it is we help our clients focus on the communication of the results and those projected actions. Because again, sometimes a lot of organizations have it come, it's done, it's 3 months later, you get results back. Well, 3 months in today's age, that's an eternity almost, you know? So we kind of make it so it's instantaneous and give you the ability to better those communication channels down the line. That's what kind of we kind of do in this area of Russ's world and the employee voice.
Yeah, and I think Russell he gave an example of a mean boss and how if they're mean and they're not open to feedback, even though if it's feedback that could improve the performance of your customer service, for example, then ultimately things will fail and the company will go down. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I've had bosses like that in the past where you're just too terrified to go into their room. But it's 2021 and it shouldn't be like that anymore. And that's why we need people like Russell who are espousing the virtues of listening to your people and giving them a voice. Anyway,
I've got a great one. I just need to interrupt you for a second before we proceed on. I once
please.
saw a manager, and this is before I started my consulting company, did a 360. So it was basically a survey about how he was as a leader. And he pulled everybody in the room, like 20 people in the room. I wasn't part of it, but he was in the area next to me, and just said, "Who would say this?" And he pointed at everybody. Did you say this? Did you? And it was just kind of like, wow, that'll never happen again. So it was a life lesson for me, 30 some years ago, that you really have those good managers, and you don't have those good managers sometimes. So yeah, it's a great point, Bill.
But you can learn just as much from a bad manager, I think, as a good one. Um,
Well,
I've been lucky to have managers in my career who are awesome and they're encouraging and they 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 brought me on and they gave me lots of positivity and belief in myself and I learned certain things from them. But I also had bad managers who you couldn't be complacent for 5 minutes, because you were so fearful of them. But that kept me on my toes. But also, of course, when I moved into a management role myself, after that, I tried to take the best lessons from the great managers and try and avoid some of the behaviors that I saw in the worst ones, right?
yeah, definitely. And here I am quoting a bad manager's experience from 30 some years ago, and I'm not quoting the good manager's experience from 30 some years ago. So yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, now let's talk about someone else who is a great leader, a great human being, someone I love. And why do I love him? Because not only does he have lots of interesting things to say, he also does a lot of awesome things in his personal life, helping a lot of cool charities. And a chance to work with him on different events, and I've interviewed him for the HR Chat Show. And that's Josh Siegel, who's the VP Organizational Effectiveness over at Wave HQ. And Josh is one of the main faces of the company. He's all about the attraction of employees and onboarding them and giving them a wonderful experience, and then being that advocate for why people should become what they call waivers over at Wave HQ. And in that particular episode, for example, we heard Josh's experiences of developing employees so that they can grow and progress within Wave HQ. He spoke a lot about culture fit and if that's even the right term to use, and perhaps instead we should look at the behaviors and the potential behaviors of candidates, and how one aligns that with the why of a business, using Simon Sinek speak. So for episode 6, Chris, once again, why don't you share a couple of your 2 or 3 of your major takeaways, and perhaps you can also align that with some of the things that you guys are doing over at Fidello.
Wonderful. Yeah, Joshua was great. I loved his energy around, talking about the employee culture and getting people to look to join the company and become a waiver. I think at one point in time I said, I want to be a waiver. Just because his energy was so high and the story was so good. So I kind of picked a couple more obscure points from his piece, but I think they're really critical. that are down there. One of the questions, I think you were the one who asked him. I don't think it was me, but you talked about the learning and development strategy um, needed to address, the organization and the development of people in the organizations. And he kind of broke it down into two things, and we kind of do this as well too on it. But I like his phraseology of it, which was first was macro training. Macro training is, hey, this is the stuff you got to do for organizational success. Everybody kind of has to do it. Kind of gets you on board. Kind of starts you into this process of becoming a waiver, because that's his term. Giving the core culture aspects of life and the fundamental focus on the mission, vision, values, those types of things that are out there. Really trying to get it in there. And then, in his L&D strategy, so that's one component of the macro level. And then the micro really gets down into the nitty gritty of the functional learning for where you're going. So when you look at it, when you do the macro and the micro, it gives you the opportunity to look at a holistic solution for learning and development for an organization, or at least from those label levels. It gives you that. And, that functional learning can be very technical, or it could be more soft skills based upon where you're at. So if it's an HR professional, it could be some soft skill stuff plus some technical stuff with legal, as well as some, things that we just talked about before us here on voice and data analytics and so forth and so on. So both soft skill and hard skill. So, it gives you that full component there. And then once you get those pieces together, you kind of create this learning strategy, which is critical for the organization. And he was dealing with it from a small organization working to go towards a larger organization. And which I thought was great, because a lot of times smaller organizations don't do this. They don't focus on creating an L&D strategy or learning and development strategy that addresses, growth potential. So as he looked at it, he kind of broke it down and said, and he comes back and he says, we really just need to continue moving the skill sets forward. The knowledge, skill, and attributes of people need to become a focused personal journey, really, for their own development. And that's key. And we're a strong believer in that too, is that, it really, you can't sheep dip, as we call it, everybody. Everybody's not going to be pink. Everybody's not going to be orange. Everybody's not going to be, purple. You need people that are a little pink, a little purple, a little orange, and you got to get the right mix for it to go for the organization to be successful. And another aspect that I loved about when he was talking about these things is one of the key principles that he learned over the years and focused on was thinking about scale. If you don't think about scale, and not just a 3-year projected, opportunity for us to, drive our culture forward in 3 years and we go from 50 employees to 500 employees, but also, what does that look like when we see that end vision, then backtrack through it and try to put in our milestones or our mile markers that we need to work towards from a development standpoint to get people there. And it really helps in the planning process that's there. So not only the supporting of the acquisition model of hiring talent, but also the formation of your culture and the aspects of your learning and development plan as you grow the organization and become strong and being focused. For our team at Fidello, we love putting together learning and development strategies that are based on skills, knowledge, and attributes. We have a great process that can get us to those points. To use Joshua's notes, both macro and micro. It's important, but we also, really feel that there's a lot of development that can occur that's not formal training. And I think that is something that sometimes gets missed in the process. And it's really great for upskilling people as they move along the organization. If you put them into projects and assignments of varied required skill levels and allow them to participate in those fully or with support, and allows them to help gain that experience of moving forward along those lines. And it's, it's cheaper, and you're moving towards a business end goal too. So there's a lot of things that we help organizations with, looking from formal training product to informal training product. And then another thing is that we love the personal journey. And so we call it, it's more of a prescriptive learning plan for you based upon either a skill and knowledge assessment or the opportunity to look at a career goal that you're trying to achieve and seeing where your deltas are for your actions, but just kind of making a personalized development plan for you. So that prescriptive learning pathway is something we help a lot of our clients to put in place. And there's there's a lot of fun things to do with that. Like one of the things that we do a lot of times, because a lot of organizations give lip service to learning and development, excuse me, and training your people, but they don't back it up. They say, "Oh, I want my people to have 40 hours of training each year," and then they don't permit them the time to do that. And so we work a lot of times with performance management for variables for managers to make sure that they've given that time to the employee. That's one of the performance metrics. So there's a lot of things we do along these lines. And just from a quick note, in the past we've created full universities to these quick development needs for a specific skill or knowledge, and we also even helped create an accredited college years ago through things. And that's a fun story. Maybe that's another podcast for us sometime. So
Maybe it is indeed. We can talk about this. Okay, so so far we've we've covered most of the areas of an employee life cycle. We've spoken about selection and recruitment. We've spoken about competency-based job profiles. We've spoken about feedback, performance management, and development plans. We've chatted about measuring engagement and the L&D efforts, and that was in relation to Russell Robinson, of course. And we've spoken about culture and engagement just now, and that was through the conversation that we had with the awesome Josh Siegel. The last two episodes of the season before the wrap-up one that we're doing today, of course, they're both kind of focused more generally on workforce planning. The episode 7 has a particular focus on change management, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And then the other episode of this season is episode 8, which actually looks at rebuilding org-wide success. But firstly, in terms of episode 7, now that was with an awesome lady called Mumtaz Chowdhury, and she's also based in Vancouver, just like Keris Hoggerty. And she's Chief Experience Officer and co-founder at Pragelis Solutions. I was re-listening to all of the interviews today, but this one really stuck out to me because I just found a lot of it very useful and very very timely. And one of the things that really stuck out for me was she said that too much change can be terribly negative, but at the same time, there's so much change going on in our world right now, our personal lives and our work lives, that you've just got to embrace it. And if you can handle it, you can handle extraordinary amounts of people changing jobs, for example, and all the recruitment efforts and so on and so forth. And you can maintain a strong company culture, then actually you're really well placed to come out of this pretty strong. So that's just some of my thoughts. From your side, Chris, when it comes to episode 7 with Mumtaz, what are your 2 or 3 big takeaways? And again, are there other things happening over at Fidello that you guys are doing in the area of change management that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, wonderful. Change happens whether we like it or not. I think that's the beautiful part about it. But I too listened to everything again today in preparation for where we're coming down, and I think I took the most notes during her section because it was jam packed. So I do encourage people, if you've not listened to it, or can't remember exactly what she said, go back and listen to it. For all of our speakers too. But this was really fun. Because change happens, and I think in her life she kind of hit the nail on the head at the beginning. That change management is really all about relationships. It's about your stakeholder relationships. It's about all your stakeholders, but then it's also having a tool set, which is really an agile process to really address change head on and focus with it. And she also highlighted another tool that they have, which is design thinking, which is think like the shareholder, the stakeholder, and then try to satisfy that need. So when you think about it, all that line, you really get some great concepts around. Okay, this is what I need to do to address change, address my stakeholders. Make sure I have good relationships with everybody, focus on their needs, understand their needs, and then be able to quickly modify my process activities to support modifications that I need to do to accept this new way of doing business or this new thought process or however. And she put it out there, but she did hit, I think Bill, you touched on it a little bit, some challenges for change management. One was change fatigue, that was out there. And I think it's important to note that change happens all the time. However, corporate change, when you continue to do tons of change initiatives, it gets a little mundane for the workers. And I think that's the fatigue she's talking to. That it's just, oh, what's our process today? Where are we going? Oh, that was different yesterday. So you get that fatigue that builds up there. So that's an issue that you need to kind of monitor and inspect. And when you're introducing new formal change plans, kind of, temper yourself and figure out where you're going and understand that stakeholder need that, this is the fifth change to that process in the last, 16 days. So, you know, how do we deal with it and how do we go from it? So just an example there. And that was my example, not hers. She's much better at it than I am with this discussion. But then one of the things that we see is huge every time we go to a client is that when, especially for our HR world, and if we have an HR community listening, sometimes you want to do something or even tasked to do it, but you don't have a purely defined sponsor at the C-suite level. Then it puts you kind of in a bind, because it's no longer the champion that can stand up for what you're trying to put in place and say, hey, this is good, I believe in it, and move forward. It's kind of like, oh, this is coming from HR. Oh, you know. So making sure you have that sponsor is really important as you work for it. And then the other thing is, sometimes we lose track. We're trying to set up the process. We're trying to think about all the things we need to do effectively to get something, from an A to Z in the modeling. But all of a sudden you realize, or you don't realize it. Usually it's the case you don't realize it, but you've been poorly communicating this along the way. And people aren't really sure, understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it. They're not bought into the process that's there. And then she also then highlights down a little bit lower that, there are fixes for it, for any change fatigue, and different things. But, it kind of comes along. It's like, monitor what's going on, keep a pulse on that. So maybe going back to Russ's thing with pulse surveys, keep a pulse on what's going on, keep a monitoring of what's there, build your leaders, enable those leaders as stakeholders like they are, enable them with tools, and communication tracks that they can move forward. And then as you continue to go forward, monitor your implementation curve, and address changes if you need to, so change within change. Isn't that fun? But put it on there and then focus on how the employee's experience changes along the way. And if you do that and make it smooth, by understanding, and this is a Fidello statement here, we do a lot with, people when you're going through a change process and you're asking them to do something different, they need to know what to they need to know what to know, and as well as what they need to do, and kind of how they need to feel as they go through that process. And when you start looking at each one of those stakeholder handoffs along those lines of know, do, and feel, you really kind of develop a good understanding of what needs to occur from either process flow change or the ability for a communication to reiterate that there. So, I kind of melded in a little bit of the Fidelloisms there, but this concept from her is really, there's a lot of opportunity for changes occurring. She highlighted a couple from the pandemic, out of the pandemic, in that digital transformation is huge. Digital skill sets are going to be, are the wave of the future, because everybody's even more focused now than they were on that going forward. And then also, it's a hybrid work environment. I think she's quoted something, and I could be wrong with this, but 80%, reimagination of work, of, I'm going to work 3 days in the office and 2 at home, or 2 in the office and 3 at home. How do we get that? And how do we get that, effective teams working back and forth? A lot of fun stuff there. And then also, focusing on the employee mental health and wellness. We're coming out of this, and, most people don't know how to act or react to all the stuff that's just occurred the last 18 months or so. And people are thinking, okay, how do we do this? And so that aspect of focusing on employee mental health are really important from that change standpoint of, we need to be addressing that, or else we're going to lose valuable employees, along the way, and some great people. So at Fidello, we kind of bring it in, and we can help you, with that change aspect. A lot of times we'll come in and we'll do a process redesign, or we'll do a tool redesign. And when we do that kind of stuff, we kind of look to leverage the best of what you had before. So assuming you had something before, if we're not just, clean sheet creating this from the fly, were there pieces of something you did before that were good, and how could we carry that forward? So, because if you can introduce a positive change by using some very familiar aspects of what people have been doing to date, it lessens the degree of impact you're going to have from a change management standpoint, and also allows them to feel that the work they've done in the past was still being valued and now it's moving forward. So it's just some things to think about when you're out there, and we work on that. And our agility and our process design really helps to minimize the the concerns of changes and change management as you roll forward.
Now, one brand, one agency that doesn't need to worry about retaining their people and all the rest of it, it turns out, is a little known space agency called NASA. Listeners, I'm not sure if you've heard of them. And the final episode of season 1 was with a chap from NASA, Dr. Philip Mead. He's the co-founder of Gallagher Edge, and he's also the associate director of Spaceport Integration and Services at NASA Kennedy Space Center. And unfortunately, Chris wasn't able to join me on this episode, but the conversation skyrocketed, and it went in lovely directions. And Dr. Mead had lots of interesting things to say, particularly around how he led a change in the culture over at the Kennedy Space Center following the 2003 Space Shuttle Columbia explosion. And the actual reason for the explosion was a little bit of foam which was missing, I think, or wasn't correctly placed. But it was so much more systemic than that in terms of the checks and the balances which were not in place, and the accountability that wasn't in place. And one of the things that he shared with me was the fact that they have the opposite problem at NASA in terms of encouraging people to take time off and to leave now, and to go away for a couple of weeks at a time now, because he's been integral in creating a new culture, where there is that accountability and also respect and support for each other. Chris, from what you heard from that interview, what are your 2 or 3 major takeaways? And again, are there any Fidelloisms? Is that the term you used? I like that. Are there any Fidelloisms that maybe you can throw in there, and examples of ways that you and your team are working within the area of helping companies to restructure, to reorganize, to regroup, if you like, in order to improve their processes?
I do like that term, Fidelloisms. That's fun. I think we're going to use that from now forward. So I do
Yes, we
appreciate that,
are.
Bill, for giving me that there. Yeah, and like everybody else who's listening right now, I had the chance to listen to this one because, as you said, I wasn't able to join in person when this occurred. So I thought it was really fascinating when their study was done that they recognized that as much as it was a hardware issue, it was a culture issue. And a lot of times organizations can't see that there are cultural impacts to their productivity and their success. And so in this case, they had to reshape and recraft their culture. And what I loved about it is that he came right out in the front of this and talked about, what we need to be high performing, effective culture, optimal word there, effective, as we're putting it forward. And then he kind of laid it out. He goes, first 2 things, and they may be kind of similar in nature. And we're going to talk about that in a second, but he referenced the high engagement, people that are just doing the stuff. They're engaged to the point where, they may not want to go home. And as you referenced, they may not be taking vacation. So that high engagement, and there's health issues with that, but I'm not going to go there. But the reward of having a highly engaged workforce that's coming to life and being in person is a great thing. And then he also said, their jobs, based upon what they're doing, were having a positive impact on themselves and the lives of the others around them. And so that positivity really focused from the high engagement to very productive impacting of people. It's great. As he phrased it, it's a fun environment to work with. That's why 1 and 2, the engagement and the productivity kind of go together, um, that are out there, and give you the opportunity to look at it and say that's a fun place to work, and we enjoy that. The last thing that he talked about in the effective culture, the high performing effective culture, was organizational performance and market success increased. And it was great this way when he started talking about it. He's like, you're thinking, okay, well, I spend time on crafting and shaping a culture, okay, that can create highly engaged and positive people, okay, down the line. Does that do anything? And so he referenced a John Cotter study that took place over 11 years, 207 companies in 22 industries. And he kind of referenced, well, not kind of, he did reference that, the ineffective cultures that they identified over that time period of 11 years had a 1% increase in their net income. And then organizations that were deemed to have an effective culture, high performing effective culture, had an increase of 756% of net income over that same 11-year period. From there, he had statistics on the increase in the stock price and just different variables that are out there, and showing astronomical differences between that highly effective culture space versus a non effective culture space. So I think it was important for you to look at that. And he did talk about a lot about team-based activities, because one person doesn't just do it all. It's an opportunity for a whole team to work, and he highlighted those things there. But one of the other aspects that we focused on with him was, or you did, Bill, was he asked him about excellent leaders. And because when you have this highly engaged workforce, you need to have leaders that can channel and can direct and can enable and produce the results that you're looking for, but also give latitude and to the workers so they can do how they need to do to be engaged in the process. So in here, he kind of put through a couple of different ideas, which are good just for us to think about. Again, we hear it often in different things, or we hear pieces of it often. But he talked about you're working through others. As an excellent leader, you're working through these other people, and you need to be able to take them to a higher place. You need to be able to focus them in such a way that the sum of the parts outweighs the parts themselves. And so you need this organization of people to outproduce one person sitting in a corner and another in another corner. And he talked about people being willing followers for people when there's a high level of trust, okay, and that trust is out there. And Stephen R. Covey has something on trust, and things that are out there. And as you start to look at that attribute, there are a lot of good pieces to it. But when you're looking at that, what does it really mean, and how do you do it? You're a good listener. You're vulnerable. Okay, it's not always that you're saying the right thing. We talked a bit before when we were looking. I think it was with Russ on the voice of the employee. The know-it-all type of leader that asks the questions that does nothing after it, or is offended by it, and provides retribution. So when you think about it, the concept of being vulnerable, you never really think of a leader as being vulnerable, but in here it's highlighting it as a real place. And then the other thing is willingness to delegate. Often we tend to promote people who are great producers, and it's hard for them to delegate and do people management skills. So but that willingness to delegate, and to delegate correctly, I think is an important thing. And so does Philip in that process that's out there. So he kind of put things in place for it, shaping that leader, putting it into a team-based approach. But I think the bottom line, and this is kind of where we're at with Fidello, is we're a preacher that culture is king. And in this case, they had to reconstruct a culture. And so, again, that's one of the things we can look at from an outside perspective and help define the culture if you can't define it inside. And, either define it or redefine it and help you shape that way where you're moving forward. And then, and through that process, you really create, we have created for clients, deliverables and actions and processes and tools that really kind of help reshape a cultural image for an organization. And a lot of times we do this with organizations that are um, mergers and acquisitions. You see a lot of times there was a parent company and they're acquiring somebody else, but the work process is different, the style is different, the attitude is different. How do we migrate that together, and how do we, build one up towards us, and or how do we, you know sometimes it's like we're not happy with either culture, so how do we create our own? And so we've been into those different scenarios, with my clients and with our consultants and team, just helping to shape that vision for the organization.
Chris, we are just about ready to wrap up this extra long episode for you listeners. But before we do, I would like to ask you the question that we ask of our guests each time we have them on. However, I'd like to do it with a wee bit of a twist, if you don't mind. So the rephrased question for you, Chris, is from a culture and people processes perspective, what changes can leaders, HR pros and talent pros make today to put their company on a path to high performance?
Excellent, Bill. Thank you very much. And yeah, and for those who've stayed this long, I hope this is worth it for you. Um, I think it is, but yeah,
I do believe
really what I think is important for my HR or associates that are here with us listening, it's really three things. First is culture, culture, culture. That's not three things, but it's just one. It's culture, and I say it three times just because it's important. We stressed it and we highlighted it in different aspects through here in this last one with Philip Mead, really kind of stressed on the culture of being as equally important to the disaster that occurred with the shuttlecraft Columbia as it was the mechanical failures. And I think that's important for organizations, especially the HR teams, to look at and say, this really is an influence. How we do things and how we get results really does make a difference in retaining and being productive and leveraging their strengths and keeping people around for a long time, assuming you want to. So the thought here is weave your culture into your processes and tools. Don't be ashamed of it. It's there. I know a lot of tools that you can't do that with because you're doing a software as a service model and everybody does the same thing. But if you need custom tools, that plug for Fidello, we can do that, because when you integrate your culture into your tool sets and when you integrate it into your processes, it just drives it home. It's a reinforcer of good things, and it's important for you to do that, and it makes it more fun for people as well too. So that's item one. Item two, be forward thinking. We've heard it called proactive today. Definitely same stuff, but take a focused look at what you strategically want to do in the future and what your needs are, and then take action accordingly. Keep that forward thinking in place, because if you rest on your laurels, that the changes that we've talked about before that happen all the time are gonna blindside you. They're gonna take you off your path. They're gonna make you think, "Oh wow, what did we do wrong?" So you have to stay on that cusp of the activity and keep moving forward, whether that's through thinking differently or taking on new people to help you think past it. There's some of these others, the concept of adding an artist to your mix allows you to have that creative vision moving forward. So $5 to anybody finds that, call me back along that line. But anyway, be forward thinking and take action along those lines. And then the last one that I reference here for this season is really, put your people in a place to succeed. Okay. It is important that your human element, your human capital, that you have, the people that you have, the workers, whatever you're going to call them, that they're able to succeed. So give them the tools that are there, give them the opportunities to succeed, give them the pathing to produce a longer career at your organization, so that you maintain that organizational intelligence that rolls forward with them from day to day. Give them the learning and development that opportunities that are going to help them advance. Give them the opportunity to change jobs inside your organization so they can get a different level of experience, again, while maintaining that organizational integrity, and or bring them back if they've gone outside, and they were with you and then went someplace else and gained more knowledge and wisdom, and maybe that'll be a benefit to you. But give everybody in your organization that pathing and that place to succeed, and you're going to be successful yourself.
Wonderful. Chris, season 1 has been a bunch of fun, and I'm super excited and happy that we've got season 2 and season 3 planned out. Yes, that's right, listeners. Season 3 is getting planned out as well. We are thinking that far ahead in terms of the content we want to bring you over the course of the next little while, the next year, in fact. So watch this space. We are going to take a bit of a hiatus now. So this episode is recorded in and going live in the first week of August, and then we're taking a wee break, and we'll be back the very first week of September with season 2 and a bunch of awesome new guests, and we're going to try some different formats with panels and various other things. So for now, firstly to you, Chris, thank you so much for being the guest this time. I hope it wasn't too uncomfortable for you. Your answers were fantastic, sir.
Well, thank you very much. It was fun, Bill. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I love your accent. It just makes me think that I'm sophisticated, so I appreciate that.
What accent? Everybody else has an accent, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pointed that out to you. Sorry, my apologies.
And my other thank you today goes to the guests that we've had on, and of course to our listeners, to our growing number of listeners and our new podcast community. Thanks very much for supporting us so far. Please do come back again in early September, where you'll hear lots of new awesome content. And until then, it's a goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from him.
Thank you. Goodbye.
This podcast is supported by Fidello Inc., a consulting firm specializing in improving human performance. Through their products and services, Fidello helps clients design, develop, and implement strategic integrated human resource processes and systems. Learn more at fidello.com. That's FIDELLO.com.